Redfall was one of the bigger and most noticeable flops in gaming during 2023. It did not only disappoint the players, but also harmed the development studio, Arcane Austin, previously succeeding in providing one of the most interesting and entertaining immersive sim games, varying from old-school Dark Messiah of Might and Magic to the remake of Prey, which was my personal favorite game at the time of its release. So how did it happen that Redfall failed, and why Arcane Austin ceased to be after its release? Let's try to find out. 2021. Redfall is being announced at the Xbox and Bethesda E3 event, and everyone seems excited about the new co-op project that is supposed to make hunting vampires with friends fun again. To be honest, I was not really that impressed even with the initial announcement, as I remembered the disaster of Wolfenstein Youngblood, turning one of the strongest first-person shooter franchises into the cringe-inducing bullet sponge fest, with bland characters and even blander gameplay. But despite it being a mediocre project in itself, demonstrating that you do not need to push the development studio specializing in immersive sims to do something else, it won't be as good. This was further confirmed by the development and the consequent release of Deathloop, the immersive sim with a bit of roguelite mechanics that I personally enjoyed and found a lot more innovative and interesting among the projects of that time. But instead of doubling down on immersive sim core capabilities and experience of Arcane, they gave us the Redfall, a co-op shooter with skills and live service elements. Apparently, this project was pitched by the new management, as after Deathloop's release and further acquisition of the studio by Microsoft, it was actually the first and sadly the last project of Arcane Austin. And apparently before, during and after the development of Redfall, the employees of Arcane kept on living and seeking other opportunities for career growth. Needless to say, with less people representing what Arcane was always about, the project, even if it was planned as good, would turn out a lot worse than planned. But the principle of overselling and underdelivering was not affected by the objectively declining state of Arcane. The initial announcement promised us the great story, a list of different characters with different separate stories of their own, great action and a lot of vampires to fight. By the way, let me know what you personally expected from Redfall at its announcement in the comments, because as I have said already, I expected nothing, to be honest. Because with such a shift in the style and gameplay approach from immersive sim to co-op shooter from the studio that has neither had no experience with it nor having any outside workforce with experience collaborating on the project, it would either turn out to be a unique masterpiece or a burning dumpster. You probably know which was it, right? With the public announcement of release delays came the first major point of controversy, the exclusivity on Xbox and PC, while saying to PS5 owners, do not pre-order the games ever again. That was already a bad sign, demonstrating that the dev team either didn't have the time or money for making PS5 version, and a bad press for Xbox with its previously growing narrative of games for everyone, but apparently not for Sony. Looking back, maybe Xbox made the PS5 owners a service by saving them from Redfall. The game's still available on Xbox and PCs, but it's not being updated and even has refunded the money that was supposed to go to the development of a Redfall DLC that has never seen the light of day. And to be honest, it's kind of sad, because the potential to have a decent live service game is there, but it needed a lot of time and effort to polish a lot and provide a lot more content. If No Man's Sky did it, the Redfall also could have become a new looter shooter live service that just works and generates income, but oh well. The launch, despite the re-releasing dates and further delays, was kinda disastrous. Combined with the frustrations associated with PS5 release, both the Xbox and PC users were dissatisfied with the performance of Redfall. It was full of bugs, glitches, texture drops, AI failures, and unstable frame rates. Even the high-end PCs were not capable of sustaining the minimum acceptable frame rate of 60, not to mention the higher rates. Obviously, the technical weaknesses of modern video games have unfortunately become a norm nowadays. However, we know the example of Cyberpunk 2077 that has taken its time, and a lot of it, to fix all the technical issues, to fix the console versions of the game, to add a lot of bug fixes, and even further add a DLC that people find even better than the original campaign. Even the beta games like Elden Ring and Baldur's Gate had their technical hiccups during the first month after launch. The majority of those is fixed nowadays. But we all know that gamers are accepting, understanding and forgiving most of the time, as long as the graphics look immersive and appealing design-wise, and overall the gameplay is fun, which sometimes makes the cases of technically bad games becoming a fun guilty pleasure many people enjoy. Obviously, Redfall is not the case here. And we immediately start with the design of playable characters. Just look at these guys. A stereotype, a stereotype, a stereotype, and a stereotype. I am not the one to complain about the cultural appropriation and misrepresentation of different races with cultures in fictional characters, but they all have shovel-like heads and extremely dumb impressions on their faces, making us think that the game is not called Redfall, but Special Needs Fall. The game seems to be developed using the Dishonored engine, with similar looking cel-shaded textures and structures. However, we all remember how great Dishonored looks, both parts and DLCs, and this is not it. The same goes to the design of NPCs, representing their respective stereotypes, and same goes to the design of the enemies and bosses, the vampires and their human minions. Humans look like cartoonish versions of Stalker bandits, and vampires look… I'm kinda speechless. It's better to show you. The closest design of vampires that looks somewhat similar is the one used in V Rising, an indie isometric RPG survival game about survival and domination, but there the vampires look actually intimidating and powerful, while having traditionally pale complexion, red eyes, sharp teeth and nails, while having the same pointy gothic-inspired choice in clothing. And let me remind you that V Rising is not a AAA game, but it's better in all aspects. What would suit Redfall the best design-wise is the approach taken by the old but gold game Vampire Masquerade Bloodlines, where we see different types of vampires that do not look overly stereotypical, instead that have their different looks, behaviors and skills depending on their clan and their abilities to adapt to modern urban life. But in Redfall, we see traditional fairy tale vampires against the urban humans, which leaves little space for connection and interest from the player to actually relate to their enemies somehow. And yeah, the enemy models, both humans and vampires, are repeatable and recyclable to an extent that it makes boring to just watch them after the first 4 to 5 hours of the game. The city and the environments of Redfall are objectively better and I like them a lot. I kinda wish the map was available for modders, so that the capable and passionate developers could make their own gaming scenarios in this environment, because it actually feels atmospheric and intriguing. We see that somehow vampires have separated the waters of the sea surrounding Redfall to cover the sunlight and stop the time around it. I generally enjoyed just walking the city areas and look through these post-apocalyptic scenes of a formerly bustling city that was artificially put on hold by some unknown force. Design-wise, it's the same array of bland offices, buildings, basements, shops, cinemas, etc. But it actually feels like the part of the graphics that was given the most attention. So, with better looking characters, better looking enemies and better looking weapons, it would be a lot more worth sacrificing electricity on gaming consoles and PCs. Weapon design, in short, non-existent, just a range of blandest pistols, rifles and other shooting weapons that never feels exciting to use and further collect, which is a shame, because Redfall is objectively a looter shooter with some story, and not otherwise. I cannot agree with the reviewers saying that the Redfall story and narrative experience is bad. That's because to be bad you need to have at least something more than 3 sentences of a basic premise. Redfall has a premise for the city, which is just a city that is a victim to a scientific experiment turning people to vampires. It has a bit of premise for the characters, attempting to shed any light on their peculiar supernatural abilities, and they have a bit of story for the NPC quest givers, to make the players feel at least something. The only thing I felt during the story is boredom, and sometimes cringe, especially from the main character. Obviously, I cannot say for every character, but if the same level of storytelling has been given to anyone, like it was given to my character Jacob, then it's kinda sad, because other than the stereotypical edgelord looks, Jacob only demonstrates explicit hatred and frustration to his companion, the Crow, that shares the mental connection with him and allows him to look in the dark and scout ahead, seeing at the long distances. His phrases are not only blatantly rude to the animal,
earn your keep, shithead,
but also provide little to almost no context or explanation why he despises the bird so much, especially because at the beginning of the game he does not even know the nature of his abilities and why this squirrel follows him around in the first place. But oh well, apparently the dev team responsible for the story decided to make Jacob a hard-boiled and grumpy former special agent character that instead feels like a spoiled teenager who did not receive the latest My Chemical Romance record as his Christmas gift, and he carries this pain and disappointment in the humanity through adult years. I understand that other characters may be different, but I was so fed up with the game and its inexistent story that I didn't want to re-experience it once again with another character. So the story is simple. We wake up around monsters, find a weapon and fight our way to one of the shelters with local survivors. We save them, and as a thanks, they send us to perform their chores and try to figure out the mysteries surrounding the Redfall. That's basically it. A simple cutscene with commentary, moving to the point where quest happens, shoot a bunch of monsters, return and watch another cutscene to eventually get a new quest from either the same NPCs or another one. Needless to say, it becomes boring pretty fast. And it's not to say that such a storytelling approach couldn't work, as it works perfectly fine in live service games and MMOs of high caliber, in which the devs actually care for their players' experience. Here, it's like the launch of New World. Move to one point, do the thing, return, and go back to the same point to do the same thing again. Very interesting story, so emotional and insightful. I won't even bother with spoilers like I did in my Immortals of Avium video, as there is literally nothing to spoil if you have ever played any video game. But like I've said, the story could be forgotten if the gameplay is good. Great gameplay even compensates technical limitations of the games in some cases. Redfall is not one of them. The aforementioned structure of gameplay loop means that you do a lot of exploring, shooting and loot collecting, so let's address all these points separately. Despite me saying that I like the graphical style of the world of Redfall and its post-apocalyptic atmosphere, I cannot say that it's fun to explore. Sure, a lot of buildings and structures are explorable and viewable either freely or with the help of certain collectible tools that you need to acquire. However, there is little reason to do so. You can hardly find any secret piece of gear or even lore. You can only find an overpowered enemy that you cannot deal with other than running away from it. You can find additional dungeons with enemies and additional shelters to develop for certain perks and inviting more survivors. All the items you collect while exploring turn either to money or to HP immediately. You do not trade with other NPCs, you do not dismantle them to craft something new, you do not craft at all by the way, at least at the beginning hours of the game. So the only reason to explore the city for you may be to find the quick travel points for you to return to the quest markers a bit faster, because you'll be spending a lot of time just traveling the land. The combat is mediocre, and overall left me not disappointed with the game more than I was after checking the story and listening to my characters hating his bird. The variety of weapons is limited to the traditional rifles, pistols, guns and a couple of new tools aimed to attack vampires with light, but the overall gunplay is not anywhere close to the one existing in modern live service shooters like Destiny, Warframe or Division, but the gunplay itself makes you forget about anything in the world, including the weaknesses of these games. The response of weapons is weak, the sound design is bland, and the overall feeling of power you get from shooting video game weapons is just not here. It all feels floaty and hits feel like they're hitting transparent mannequins. What worse in this regard and makes the combat boring a lot quicker, the enemy AI is one of the stupidest I've seen so far. Both vampires and their human minions just rush at you. The accuracy of their attacks is the same of the stormtroopers from Star Wars, and they just tend to stop in their places thinking about life, waiting for you to shoot them. To compensate for this and to artificially create any challenge, the devs have decided to make every enemy a bullet sponge, add random teleportations to the vampires, and just add damage to their attacks. So the combat encounters look like this. With bosses, it becomes even worse, because with more health, they've apparently attained more brain damage and their AI just stops working at some point. This would be a point of criticism for an indie developer with a lot of ambitions but little experience and money. But for a AAA company with respective budgets, it is just an acceptable quality of combat. Bullet sponge nature of enemies means that you'll be required to collect weapons regularly and change them frequently. This means that you'll just be chasing the numbers while the enemies become always better than you and hitting a lot harder than you. Weapons are being acquired from quests or bought from NPCs for in-game money, which you can also collect by dismantling the older weapons. Additionally, with every new activity you get some experience, get levels and get more perks that were supposed to help you combat the enemies, but in reality I felt little difference, as the main comes from the weapon numbers first of all. And you also get some perks from saving hostages and maintaining aforementioned shelters, a nice mechanic that also feels unfinished and uninfluential gameplay wise. So, the gameplay of Redfall is run into quest markers, shooting floaty guns to chip away from enemy health bars to get another gun to repeat the cycle. Combined with bland graphics, inexistent story and bad functionality, it's not the most fun experience, especially because there is no indication which enemies are higher level than you or lower. You just face them and either wipe the floor with them or they wipe the floor with you. And when they do, you start again from your safe house and spend another 5 minutes running to the quest mark. Basically, that's why there is no endurance or sprint meter, because your only option of traversing the levels is running. In total, with all that I have said, the game was not only boring to play, but was also a challenge to even boot on a gaming device. It obviously required a lot more time developing, creating and customizing content, designing quests, thinking through the main paradigm of the gameplay, optimizing the graphics and making everything that made previous Arcane projects one of the best in their respective styles. And I cannot blame the developers, as they were obviously given the project that were never interested in, they were not given enough time, money and personnel to make the Redfall the way it was intended to be. And that's why the game is objectively dead, while the remaining workers from Arcane Austin work for different studios. However, just like I've said before, on paper, Redfall could have been the Helldivers from Xbox team, and I believe it still could, if given a lot more time and attention from the people actually capable and interested in making live service games. I would imagine Redfall having a unified hub of online players, where with matchmaking they would be sent in teams of 4 members on missions to fight vampires and collect loot. For this, the gunplay needs to be fixed, the AI needs to be smarter, the functionality and optimization needs to be on point as well. Redfall could even have a separate gaming mode with extraction, where you could play solo or as a team to loot certain items and fight vampires along with other players. The case of Hunt Showdown and other extraction shooters demonstrate that people like this stuff, and after that, it could have looter type mechanics, even battle passes, other BS like skins, etc. It just needs to be sold to other developer, who would build the game on the basis of Redfall's engine and its map. I am also sure that if it was publicly modifiable, the enthusiasts would make it a lot better game than it actually is and ever was. And And that's it for today. If you liked the video, please click a like, and if you're here for the first time, consider subscribing to the channel. Share your thoughts and impressions about Redfall in the comments below, and let me know what other game should we analyze to figure out why it failed. As of now, I'll thank you all for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.
That's better.